When I went headfirst into the world of comics giving my takes, I was always waiting for what I'm gonna call the breath of the wild moment. And what I mean by that is obviously something that belongs with the other great works of art, something I'd be thinking about long after I finish it, but also an experience that could only happen through reading a comic book. And Batman The Long Halloween is that shit. It's a towering example of what comics should strive to be, and I will be spoiling it extensively. If you have not read this masterpiece and you think you might want to, please do so. That is an order. I don't care about the lost watch time. All I ask is come back here once you've done it so we can fully take it in together, because let me just say, this is unlike anything else I have read on this channel. Anyways, no more delays. Let's talk about the best comic I have read so far. Batman The Long Halloween. I don't know if it's just we're in that spooky season right now, but this art hits different. I feel like you can tell that they thoroughly planned this out and had an overall vision. This is one of the thickest atmospheric stories I have ever read. The panel design is so unique with just so many creative examples, like this one with the panels being the actual sight line of the character speaking through this little window, even going so far to have his fingers at the bottom right corner. They play frequently at the boundaries of the page, especially early on. There's just so many visual motifs, like there's this little iris at the bottom right. It's just so good, and it's one of those things that can only be in comics. I love that. The shot composition is also so unique. Like there's this overhead shot of the rug, but without the panel boundary, which is something I've never really seen yet. And even though it's a desaturated story, the use of color really hits home when it does come. I think before I had this misconception that simpler art was worse, but I think this does such a good job of having a minimalistic style and letting your brain fill in the details in a way that creates such a uniting tone and palette. I really don't like it when superhero media try to downplay the campiness or fantastical elements, because by definition it really is, and here's a great example of acknowledging it in a really cool way with this like absurd amount of money. Pivoting from general art to character design, let's start with Batman and Catwoman. These two are such a good combination of their core designs while still being able to recognize that this is a specific illustrator's version of the characters. And on that point, I haven't really seen a Batman-Catwoman romance done well, but Selina's a really good character tool, ironically more for Bruce Wayne instead of Batman. And honestly, Batman in this is more of a force or even like a symbol than a character. I really like that Batman often says that Gotham is his city, because it treats the Batman-Gotham relationship almost like an abusive one. Batman in this has to grapple with pledging his life to the betterment of the city that has done so much harm to him. It feels so real. To tell the truth, all the villains look great. I love that they have these panels with half of Harvey's face visible when he's slowly descending into Two-Face mode. Poison Ivy's design is now my definitive favorite iteration of the character. But enough art, let's talk about the story. At the time of the start of the story, Harvey, Gordon, and Batman are this trio working together to take down the mob, led by Falcone. But even though these three want the same thing, they all have very distinct philosophies, and it leads to a lot of really interesting conflicts. For example, Gordon believes in the institutions of justice and order, even if they are imperfect, while Batman obviously believes in morality above the law. So then, it positions Harvey in this really interesting middle ground, and it's not something I see talked about a lot. Very early on in investigating Falcone, Harvey gets blown up, and this is where you naturally expect his face to be scarred. But in the first of many twists, he's actually okay and got a confession by posing as the criminal, but nothing ends up happening because of the corruption, and coupled with his wife being hospitalized, you can just see him losing faith in the criminal justice system by the minute. Last thing I want to comment from this bit is how Batman actually gives Solomon Grundy a Thanksgiving dinner after beating him up earlier, and it's just so cute. Now that we've set up Gotham at the start of the story, I want to talk about how much I love this chapter system. Instead of having normal separate issues, the chapters in Long Halloween correspond with the holidays of the year. Basically, it does what year one did, but way better, and it allows you to internalize the time passing so well. And overall, for a 13-issue story, the pacing is immaculate. Oh, and I am just in love with these chapter covers. They are so gorgeous. Likewise, the action here is also really good because they take that minimalistic approach from earlier, and your imagination just fills in the rest perfectly. It's at this point the main conflict of the story comes up. There is a new killer called Holiday that is consistently murdering mob members on US holidays. And initially, I thought this was going to be a Two-Face origin story with maybe a mob backdrop. But then chapter 3 hits. I really like when each villain is placed. It's like kind of the perfect holiday combination. For example, Joker, the color and design wise just goes so well with snow and Christmas. It's a pairing I didn't know I wanted. And his writing here too is perfect. I love that he goes into this family's home and steals their presents. It's just like very on brand. It's very apparent that the writers get him, and I really didn't expect Joker to work so well as a secondary antagonist, but he is a delightful presence every page he's on. Oh, I lost it when he asks Batman for a midnight kiss on New Year's. As Holiday keeps taking more and more victims, there are a lot of interesting themes and ideas that I was pretty surprised haven't come up for me in other Batman media. For instance, there's this idea that Batman's presence almost incentivizes more crime in Gotham because he's such a symbol, and it's almost like reverse psychology, and that's pretty fascinating to think about. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the tone is not brutally oppressive like Year One. Like, there are moments that are funny, but they don't betray the overall story, and it just makes it so easy to read. And lest we forget about the Joker, he is a delight with all of his little costumes, and he's obsessed with finding the Holiday Killer as much as Batman is, and him acting as a detective is a story I never knew I needed. Obligatory art is amazing, and by this point in the story, there are so many intertwining plot points that you're always getting introduced to something exciting, but without feeling overwhelmed. Right now, you have Joker, Batman, Harvey, and Gordon all investigating the Holiday Killer at the same time. Maroni and Falcone are beefing, and it just makes for such a great flow. If I had to come up with a nitpick, I would say I don't really like Selina's design. And you already know that I hate it when Gordon is mean to his wife, and I know at this point it is part of the character, but I really don't think it tells anything interesting. But on the other hand, I do really like that they actually spend time with Barbara and Gilda, who's Harvey's wife, in empathizing with their struggles, and I really feel like they are far from the static characters they were in Year One. This narrative is just working so well for me because it sets up almost every character to be intertwined with another's conflict. With pretty much all of them, they could have the motivation to be in some part the Holiday Killer. And this gets even more interesting when Falcone eventually tricks Harvey and Gordon into thinking Bruce Wayne is the Holiday Killer. And when they bring up that Bruce's father had dealings with Falcone, it just adds this new layer of intrigue. All this is going on while time is of the essence. You can just feel the urgency because every time the Holiday Killer strikes, the page just goes to black and white in this mic drop moment. Like, when you think about it, this story is amazing because it has Catwoman, Maroni, Falcone, Joker, Harvey, Two-Face, Gordon, Batman, Poison Ivy, Solomon Grundy, Riddler, Calendar Man, Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, and it just works. I really commend the writing because it makes it feel like Gotham is in the shitter. It's not a rotating queue of the villain of the week, it's all the villains, all around you, all the time. One notable exception to these villains is Catwoman. I love that she gets some time to be basically the primary protagonist when Bruce is taken out of the story by Poison Ivy. I just feel like deep down, because Holiday at this point is only killing people in the mob, there is a part of you that is like, well, the enemy and my enemy is my friend, right? So let's talk about Holiday, the mystery, and why they're killing. Holiday as a villain is so awesome since everybody from the Joker to the Batman to the mob all have reasons to unmask him or her, so by being universally sought after makes this villain, despite me not knowing a damn thing about them prior, one of the most compelling original villains I have ever read, and we haven't even seen their face yet. And the story really spends time going into how every character pretty much could be Holiday. In my mind, Harvey has always been the prime suspect, but there's still so many questions I had. Like, logistically, he really couldn't have committed all of the murders. You know, like, why include Calendar Man? Is he just like a red herring? A secondary mystery that I noted down when I was reading this is who's gonna catch this guy, because letting every character in the story all investigate and show off their intellect is so fun and rewarding when one actually gets them. All the while, villains are breaking out of Arkham Asylum, and Scarecrow, being one of them, hits Batman with the fear gas, so Bruce goes back to where his parents were murdered, only to find Gordon and Harvey, who kind of ensue in this chase because they still suspect him, and it just ends with this harrowing panel into the Mother's Day chapter, and it is just so good. Bruce is thrown in jail, but we finally learn Thomas Wayne's involvement with Falcone, which is basically that he was his doctor and saved his life. It's not only a really good twist, but it ties into the greater conflict of justice, except replacing Batman's golden rule with the Hippocratic Oath, which I just think is a really interesting take. And now we get one of my favorite parts of the story, the trial of Bruce Wayne. I love that Harvey puts Alfred on the stand, and he really gets to shine in the first time for me in comic form. I'm just reflecting between this and year one how the mob has turned from me into like the least interesting Batman villain to one of my favorite in a way like the movies have really not captured. And Holiday is still killing it, even though he/she hasn't killed anyone incredibly important. The time limit with each Holiday makes for such a good ebb and flow. Too many stories, in my opinion, have a villain who is just like waiting around until they get caught. In this, we know exactly when they will and won't strike. Okay, time to talk Two-Face. Previously, the way I thought of Two-Face, and specifically his coin, was very surface level. You know, like I thought of it as a trait. You know, Poison Ivy has plants, Catwoman has cats, but here they really take the time to explain the coin and how it relates to Two-Face's philosophy in a way that it just made me click. Basically, in the entire story, Harvey is the embodiment of justice at all costs, and yet the one time when he puts real faith in the justice system, being Bruce Wayne's trial, they fail him, but he doesn't understand it because he doesn't understand people. He only understands what he thinks are the facts, and it's this perception that the jury just seems to flip a coin to decide who's guilty, puts so much more into the Two-Face persona than I ever really expected. And by this point, artistically, you can just see Harvey as a completely different character. And Harvey's downfall is shown so well through Gilda, who has some great character moments, and it adds a lot of humanity to the situation. At this point in the story, looking at my notes, I wrote down that I was pretty sure that Two-Face is Holiday, but I also wrote down that I was really hoping it's not. Because of Gilda, it makes for a really awesome time where I'm almost rooting against my predictions. Also, is it just me, but I think they hint that Bruce and Selina know each other's identities? I don't know if that's like a thing, but I noticed that. Back to the action, Gilda finds Harvey stashing the actual Holiday gun at their house as quote-unquote evidence, and we just see how far gone he is, and it makes Two-Face go from villain of the month to an actual tragedy. And Gilda's face just speaks volumes here. I have never heard of her before this, so writing an original character that evokes this level of emotion is mad impressive, especially considering she's like a minor side character. And we finally arrive to Harvey getting acid thrown at him, and it is just so sad. And I fucking love Two-Face's design. I love that he parallels Batman by referring to Gotham as his city, reinforcing that they are aiming to achieve the same thing, get rid of the mob, but in different ways, and perhaps they are the opposite sides of the same coin, one could say. So when Two-Face actually kills Maroni, obviously the tragic fall of the character is complete, but I really love these different speech bubbles for the different personalities, and this guy just has aura. And instead of just like turning into a maniac, Two-Face actually meets with Batman and Gordon and tries to persuade them that he did the right thing in a pretty convincing, morally great argument. It's not like he's a crazy guy who belongs in an asylum like Scarecrow. It's if you go outside the justice system, like Batman already does, is it that crazy of an argument? Before I finally reveal who Holiday is, I have some quick thoughts that I couldn't find places to put. Nearly 300 pages in, I found some ugly art. I think you inevitably think of The Dark Knight when you read the story, and I think Christopher Nolan really heavily read this in preparation of making it, but it still makes me kind of upset that they didn't do more with Two-Face. Like, I love Two-Face in that story, but it's almost like paling in comparison to this. I would say Gilda, after Harvey goes missing, is like a harder emotional hit than anything else in this story, honestly. There have always been comparisons of Batman and noir films. There's actually an optional story in the back of Man Who Laughs that I skipped called Batman Noir. I don't really have any interest in it because I'm not a big noir fan, but this story, being Long Halloween, is just a really great way to adapt the parts of noir that I think are strong while kind of leaving out the stuff that is aged poorly. Okay, now we are finally going to see who Holiday is, and I'm on the edge of my seat, so be warned because we are entering there is just something about seeing a villain that you know nothing about in a superhero story that is so exciting. Who is this really? What is his backstory? What are his motivations? And Holiday being Falcone's son is so out of left field, I never would have predicted it. But looking back to the beginning of the story, it's so clear he's right there in the wedding scene, and I would honestly say that this twist of it not being Harvey was pretty good. Hashtag squad goals. Holiday's arrested, and we go into one of my favorite tropes where the villains fight each other. It's Maroni, Falcone, and the mob versus the supervillains, and it is just so fun. I love this little conversation between Gordon and Batman at the end when they're coming to terms with the fact that Falcone and the mob are gone, and that's probably a good thing because Gotham is safer, but they lost one of their biggest allies in Harvey, and arguably the principle of how they got there. But then, as we're going into the falling action, we see a panel with Two-Face calling his wife's name, and we're like, okay, he's kind of insane, it's a split personality, but then it's revealed that Gilda was also involved in the Holiday murders, and my jaw is just on the floor. Normally, I would kind of have an issue with someone this blatantly outsmarting Batman, but this is impeccable, and when you think about her motivation to kill all of these mobsters so she can finally have the life she wants with her husband is so hauntingly beautiful. Gilda, you're goated. My closing thoughts after finishing this masterpiece is how much I appreciate the story having respect for my intelligence. Holiday the individual or individuals isn't what's interesting. They're interesting because they have disturbed the principles of every major character in this world in a truly unique way. I also like that they show that it's in the same continuity as year one. You can see Falcone in his scratched face that he got in that story, but it doesn't alienate readers who might have skipped that entry. And the last page in the deluxe edition has this little quote from Christopher Nolan saying, "The Long Halloween is more than a comic book, it's an epic tragedy." And I do agree, it is an epic tragedy, but I really don't like the way he's saying this because, like, it's a story that would only work well in comic form, and that is really awesome. And before I give it the old score, if you have recommendations for what I should read next, be it Batman or another hero, please let me know. I'm always looking for suggestions. My tentative plan is to go to Daredevil again or maybe Spider-Man, but I haven't made up my mind, so subscribe if you don't want to miss what I do, or when I inevitably come back to our favorite little bat. Batman The Long Halloween is about so many things. It's the struggle for power from the mob to the supervillains. It's the conception of justice, the cat and mouse game, and it flawlessly executes it all from the writing, the art, the action, and this is without a doubt the best comic I have read so far and the true first 10 out of 10 masterpiece type shit. To everybody that recommended this to me, thank you. Have a good one.